So wonderful. We are live on YouTube now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Atul Khosla. I am the founder and pro-vice chancellor of Shulini University, Himachal Pradesh, Solan. That's where St. Luke's is. And it's my honor and pleasure to speak to you today. We're going to be talking about the new education policy. Joining with me are Dr. Kamal Kant and Shikha Sood. And we'll also have Vivek Atray join us in a bit of a while. Kamal, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to all the delegates of Bethany Educational Society. And just before the start of the webinar, we were having a conversation, Atul sir and I, and we were feeling nostalgic because both of us are ex-Lukeites, and St. Luke's, of course, belongs to your society. And we've had spent our entire childhood in St. Luke's, and whatever we are, we credit it to the schooling we got from the highly acclaimed school. And with us is Ma'am Shikha, and she's the director for admission outreach of Shulini University. And plus also we have Professor Atul Khosla, who is the founder and pro-vice chancellor of Shulini University, which is one of the most dynamic, young and upcoming university of not only of the Himachal Pradesh or northern region, but of the entire country. And so more information would be shared by Professor Atul. But we welcome you all to this very, very interesting, inspiring series that we have named Ideas That Matter. And while the world got locked down due to Corona, and everyone was like panic struck, so Professor Atul, Ma'am Shikha, and the entire Shulini fraternity thought about spreading some awareness, thought about spreading some positivity around the world. And we came up with quite a few series of webinars, and Yogananda Guru series being one of them. But one of the most successful and one of the most consistent has been Ideas That Matter, wherein Professor Atul and one of our dear friends, Vivek Atray, would be coming to join us in a while. And both of them had like held together, and this is like the 100th, probably, Shikha ma'am, if I'm not wrong, it's the 98th edition.
Yeah, today is the 98th edition of it. Yes.
Perfect. So it's the 98th edition of Ideas That Matter. That has been such an inspiring journey over the last few months. And I hand it over to Professor Atul Khosla, who has been the architect of this journey and the architect of this entire series. So over to you, Atul sir.
Thank you very much, Kamal. Thank you for this introduction. The topic for the day is going to be the new education policy, and I will talk about how the new education policy was framed, keeping India in mind. What are the implications for school education and also for higher education? Of course, we're speaking to the schools and teachers in schools, so my focus will be a lot more on school education than it is on higher education. But I'll start by talking about the philosophy behind the new education policy. We all know that to become a developed country, India needs to be a highly educated country. Countries where knowledge flows is really where success happens, development happens. And I think that's also a joint effort, probably, of the way Shulini thinks about education. And I think the Bethany Education Society also thinks exactly about it. So the whole philosophy behind the new education policy is what the government calls universalization of education. And there's a term called the gross enrollment ratio. It means how many of our children actually enter the schools and graduate out from schools. The government aspires to make this 100% over the next 10 years. By 2030, we expect the gross enrollment ratio to be 100%, which means every Indian student, every Indian kid is literate, not just in alphabets, but as the new education policy talks about, in numeracy. So literacy and numeracy are the 2 points which the new education policy talks about. To make it happen, the government has philosophically and strategically agreed to increase the investments from 2% of GDP or gross domestic product of the country to 6% of GDP. That's a huge change. That's 3 times more investment into education than what it is today. What it translates to is that 20% of total government expenditure should happen in education. And that is path breaking. And if it happens, imagine a new India. Imagine a new India which is so exciting with so many wonderful schools. And of course, there'll be so many more opportunities for new schools and for our teachers. And of course, our students getting wonderful education. So, what are the specifics of the new education policy? So, when it comes to schools, there are 7, 8 things that the government is talking about. The first is that it aims to make the whole education system in India more flexible and more multidisciplinary. What we mean by that is the students should be able to join the system or drop out when they feel like. Of course, in school education, you don't want any student to drop out, but they should be able to join the education system whenever they feel like, and that's the flexibility that the new education policy is talking about. The second thing that they're talking about also is how you learn, and the focus is on multidisciplinary learning and and I'll talk about this later, is about ensuring that there is limited distinction between arts and sciences. So, of course, there needs to be a new regulatory framework to make it happen. And that's what you as teachers will start see happening. So there's going to be something called the Central Advisory Board of Education, which will be created, which will define the policies of school education. And what's most relevant for all of you is something called the SSSAs, which will be created, the State School Standards Authority. So these will be authorities that will regulate the different policies of the government across the different schools. I think the big difference is going to be that the new education policy talks about self-regulation. So rather than inspectors coming into schools, you would now expect self-regulation, which means they will expect you as schools to ensure that your websites are fully loaded with all the information that the regulator seeks and all the information that the public seeks. So we've always known that self-regulation is better than someone else regulating us. Self-discipline is better. That's exactly what the new education policy talks about. There'll be new focus on new schools, so which means the Bethany Education Society should think about new schools if it so desires, and the government will be promoting new schools, of course, with the caveat that they should be philanthropic in nature and not for profit in nature. So how will education change? And let me talk about the 6, 7 points of change in education. The first area is from moving from 10+2 to a new system, which is the new education policy calls 5+3+3+4. So number of years is the same, which is 8 + 3, 11 + 4, 15, which is typically, so it's primary and pre-primary and secondary. So the first 5 years is what the new education policy calls as foundation years. This will include the first 3 years of pre-primary and then standard 1 and 2. It will not be textbook based. It will be more what they call multi-level activity based, and it will encourage discovery-led learning. So the first 5 years are going to be very different. Rather than use of books as we talk about it today, they're going to move into learning by doing. The second stage is going to be what the policy calls it preparatory stage. So the preparatory stage is going to be grade 3, 4, 5. And during the preparatory stage, there is going to be a focus on introducing or a gradual introduction to textbooks. And this is the stage where the concept of literacy and numeracy will be brought in. So I'll again repeat, the first 5 years is the foundation where you'll be taught in your language, which you're comfortable with. which is either your home language or the regional language or the mother tongue. And that's a big, big, big change. And I think all of us will have to be ready to move to this new system. The second is the preparatory stage, which again will be taught in either of these three languages. I repeat, the mother tongue, the home language, or the regional language that the student is most comfortable in. Focus of the preparatory stage again is going to be on the initial start. So it's the start and a gradual introduction of textbooks. The third stage is the middle stage, which the new education policy propels. This is grade 6, 7, 8. And there's going to be an introduction to formal subjects during this stage. This is the stage where the new education policy talks about building concepts in students. It's going to be about experiential learning. So students learning by doing experiments and not just roting from books. The whole policy is built around, like I said, moving away from remembering to actually learning through creation, learning through experimentation. And that's where the whole focus of this policy is. The last part is going to be the secondary stage, which is 9, 10, 11, 12 standard. This is going to be multidisciplinary. It's going to focus on critical thinking, a deeper understanding on subjects, flexibility with electives, and more importantly, less distinction between the arts and the sciences. So imagine a situation where students can pick up their own electives and they don't have to choose in the 11th standard whether they will do only arts or sciences. It's going to be very similar, I think, like what we have up to the 10th grade where students study both arts and sciences. So that's sort of the high level thought about how the school education system will be created. For teachers, there is a new concept called a 4-year B.Ed, which is being created. So rather than doing an undergrad and then doing a B.Ed, there'll be more focus on an integrated 4-year B.Ed program, which is aligned with the broader higher education or the college system. So a few highlights of what's going to happen in colleges. The government is going to promote 4-year degrees rather than just 3-year degrees. And these will be research-centric degrees. So you could do a BA or a BSc in 4 years, including a B.Ed. There'll be more focus again on multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary education. Students will have the flexibility of spending 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years in school, college, university, and also possibly drop out. So after 1 year, they can get a diploma. After 2 years and 3 years, they can get a degree. And in the 4th year, they will get an advanced degree. And that's great because so many Indian students want to study in colleges and then go and work and then come back. And the new education policy promotes this. The third area is including liberal arts education into higher education. So study of arts, study of music, study of softer subjects into education. So imagine now an engineer who's only studying 50% of his or her time in engineering and 50% on areas that he or she likes. It could be music, it could be computer science, it could be anything. Incidentally, at Shulini, we've already started doing a lot of this, but this is something which the new education policy would want every higher educational institution to propel. The fourth thing is going to be, which might not be very relevant for you teachers, is about one regulator. So today the regulatory landscape in higher education is highly fragmented. We've got regulators coming from individual subjects like the Pharmacy Council of India, the Medical Council of India, the AICTE, etc. So there'll be one regulator which will define the same policies for every university across the country, whether it's public or private. Today, there are separate notions for private universities and there are separate notions for public universities. The government will also push for at least one college or one multidisciplinary HEI per district. And that's again a huge change. Your students who today probably are going to Chandigarh or going to other places for study because the quality of colleges is not as good. It's probably that situation is going to change where each district of the state of the country will have these multidisciplinary HEIs. So what are these multidisciplinary HEIs? These will be higher educational institutions which with at least 3,000 to 5,000 students teaching courses and programs from engineering to science to liberal arts to softer sciences. including fine arts. The whole idea is that the student should be able to learn a vast range of subjects and become knowledge experts, because that's really what we want to do. We want to build a knowledge society. The sixth area is how universities will be graded. And that's again very relevant for your students, because there'll be three different types of universities going forward as per the new education policy. There'll be research universities where students can actually do a 4-year undergrad degree with a focus on research. Then there'll be teaching universities, which will be the predominant number of universities where you'll have both 3-year and 4-year degrees. And finally, there'll be autonomous colleges. So the new education policy wants all colleges to become autonomous. It aspires for at least 50% of school children to go into colleges and become college graduates. So that's the term I introduced, which is a gross enrollment ratio, GER. So 100% gross enrollment ratio by 2030 for schools and 50% for colleges and higher educational institutions. A bunch of other things. If you're teachers and you want to do a post-graduation, and if you've done a 4-year degree, then your PG is going to be 1 year and not 2 years anymore. But of course, if you've done a 3-year degree, then it's going to be 2 years. But I think for most teachers who are BEds, it's going to be a 1-year PG, which is a big change. So I think in the new education policy as teachers, you can actually go out and educate yourself and become better teachers. There'll be common guidelines for public and private universities, lots more of distance education and online education. So again, our students who are graduating out from schools could become, either could enroll themselves in colleges, or they could actually get distance education from online and other platforms, which I personally think is absolutely phenomenal, because every student doesn't either have the opportunity or doesn't have the money or doesn't have the time to actually go to college. I think a couple of other things which I think are very relevant for schools. The new education policy is going to promote something called the National Education Technology Forum, NETF, where our old challenges of technology will be sorted out. So we have Sister Isabella here. Hello, ma'am. How are you? Good to see you. I know you've been struggling with technology, and it's a passion to bring in the best technology to your students. So the National Education Technology Forum is saying that we will have technology and softwares in regional languages. We will have software and technology which is available to all the schools and universities, and ensure that every student gets seamless experience on technology, not the way it is. We have issues of bandwidth. We have issues of connectivity. I think all of us are aware of that. So again, the new education policy talks about bringing in fiber and bandwidth to every remote corner of the country. So it's path-breaking from a technology perspective as well. Finally, two more things. We're talking about foreign universities being allowed in the country. So imagine in the next 10 years, you'll have a Harvard in the country, a Harvard in India, an Oxford University in India, a Stanford University in India, but it's only allowed for the top 100 universities of the world. And top Indian universities will be encouraged to open up campuses across the world. So again, I think from a school perspective, it could be very exciting, because your students could come do their first 2 years, for example, in a university like Shulini in India, and then they could go to the United States or Canada or United Kingdom or wherever they want to do, and these credits will be transferred to them in that part of the world. Or vice versa, you could have foreign university students spend 2 years in, let's say, the United States, and then their final 2 years in India. So what an amazing flexible system. So that's going to be part of something called the National Accreditation Board, or NAB. And the National Accreditation Board will make sure that the credits that you get, or the courses that you have graduated and you have cleared, can move from one university to the other. I'm really, really excited about this, sister, because imagine a situation where you do your first 6 months at Shulini, the next 6 months in Chandigarh, the next 6 months in Delhi University, and the final 6 months of your program in some other part of the world. And it could be so much educative for the students. The policy also focuses on the NRF, or the National Research Forum. So both schools and universities will be pushed towards research. So the whole philosophy behind the new education policy, as I understand, and I've been in some initial discussions when the policy was being framed, is around, like I said, number one, every student should come to school. Every student should get educated. Every student should have the flexibility to go in, go out of the system, which means if there are dropouts, we should encourage them to get back into learning, whether it's in schools or the college level. So that's one. Huge investments in education is the second area. So 2% to 6% of GDP is what we are talking about, and that's an absolutely phenomenal increase in expenditure of education. We're also talking about taking away these very very heavy bags that students have, and I explained the 5+3+3+4 system. So the first 5 years, no textbooks. So first 3 years pre-primary, and this next 2 years is grade 1 and 2. I'll repeat. And those 5 years is going to be a lot about learning by experimenting, learning by doing, or discovery-led education, as the new education policy calls it, multi-level activity-based learning, as they call it. So there's going to be an exam at 4 different stages, which will be conducted by the different boards after the first 5 years. Then the next stage, of the middle stage, which is 6, 7, 8, and this stage, 3, 4, 5, which is the preparatory stage. This is where textbooks will be introduced, but focus will not be on too much of textbooks learning. It'll be a lot more on experiential learning. Literacy and numeracy numeracy has been brought in, and I think that's a new concept. So historically, we've been talking about literacy, which is learning the alphabet. Numeracy is the ability to learn numbers, and it's largely coming from several studies done by the government of India, which suggest that students are not very good at mathematics anymore, while India was known as the country of mathematics. So it's a big challenge over there. The middle stage is 6, 7, 8, and this is really where formal subjects will be introduced. This is where you'll be teaching them concepts of physics, chemistry, and history, and the other languages and the other subjects. And the final secondary stage is really where they'll hone these concepts. With a difference, like I said, there will be no differentiation between arts and sciences. So the new education policy says no difference. I think another big change, and I'll again repeat that, is the languages at which they will be taught. So up to grade 5, the new education policy is very clear that it should be education should be in the home language or the mother tongue or the regional language. And we'll have to see how English sort of plays a role, because so far historically we have done our education in English. Your teachers will be required to do 4-year B.Eds, which come into place. So that's sort of the broad framework in a nutshell, and how it looks like, what are the different differences. Now, I think the big challenge which is going to be for all of us is, as we all know, is a slip between the lip and the cup, and how well these policies are being implemented. And I'm in multiple debates with lots of educators across the country in terms of, what's going to really change. I think you'll ask this question: when will things change? When do we see a major change happen? So the first point I'd like to make over here is that at a policy level, this all looks great, but education is a concurrent subject. What it means is that states have control over education. While the center can come up with a policy, the states have to agree with the policy. I expect another 1 year for navigation of the policy across different states, and probably another year for the policy to be implemented in some form or the other, at least in the near term. So we are probably 1 to 2 years away. What can we do as school principals and teachers? I think really is to study the policy. So I'll separately send the details of the policy, a summary of this policy, to your sister. Sister Isabella, and I think there's Sister Halima here. So I'll send it to you. You should study it. One of the things that we are doing at Shulani is we have decided to implement the new education policy in spirit, pretty much starting the next 6 months. So we are independently, we've created a small committee of our distinguished professors who are studying the new education policy, and we're coming up with a plan of implementing the new education policy into the country, into Shulani University. And I would strongly encourage all of you to also initiate such a process where you study the policy in depth and come up with your plans. I think the major changes that I see for all of us from an education perspective, number one is many more schools. So if the Bethany Education Society aspires to build more schools, this will be an opportunity with the government really pushing for new schools going forward. Like I said, the government wants 3 times more schools in the next 10 years. So that's one opportunity for us philanthropists to take our thoughts and our knowledge and our thinking to other parts of the country or deepen our platform that we have. So that's, I think, one big change. I think there'll be many more jobs for teachers. The new education policy is also talking about superior uh, scales as far as salaries are concerned. So I think there'll be better talent getting into education as teachers. So that's one area that I think which will be very good for us, because we'll have better students actually opting out for teaching rather than how it is today. And I hope that happens. So I think that's a second very big change for us. Moving into a home language or mother tongue or regional language has to be seen how it's implemented. I am told that in Tamil Nadu, it's being resented at this moment. West Bengal is also resenting this. So for schools where English is the primary language as a starting point, we'll have to see how the policy sort of gets implemented across your schools. But investing in, I think, the home language or the mother tongue might be something that you might want to think about as a school. There will be, I think, focus on technology. So investing in that technology platforms that you already have started will I think also be very important. So I think these are sort of high level thoughts, which I gave. We'll also have Vivek join us in a couple of minutes. He'll also give his thoughts and we'll get into a discussion. But I'd love to hear from Sister Isabella. She's here. Hello, ma'am. Good evening. I'd love to hear your initial thoughts, perspectives about what you've heard about the new education policy and how are you gearing up to meet these exciting challenges and the exciting opportunities which are coming up. Sister Isabella, can you give us your perspective for a couple of minutes? We'll truly appreciate that. I think she's probably not connected. I think there's a challenge with audio. No challenge. So Dr. Kamal, could you, I'll appreciate if you could come. Yes, ma'am.
I think she is not her audio.
I think there's a problem with the audio. That's right.
Yes, she's connecting. It's showing.
No, it's not working. No, I think your voice is not coming out clear, Sister Isabella. Seems to be some. So this is what technology is all about. We still struggle with technology every now and then. Hopefully we will solve this, or human beings will solve this in the next 1 year or so. So Kamal, you've been following, you're a professor of education, and you've been following the new education policy. I think you've been following it for the last couple of years. You've been involved in multiple discussions. So how do you see more online and more digital happening? Do you see a change in the way teaching happens? What's your take on the new education policy?
Honestly speaking, sir, I'm very excited about this new education policy, and I've been so it was due for some time. It was due since long, and so when we talk about like the levels of learning, there's a framework which is known by the name of Bloom's taxonomy. and I am a very strong advocate of that Bloom's taxonomy, and I always talk about it. So in Bloom's taxonomy, there are like 6 levels of learning, and the base level is like the memory, or what we call uh, mugging up things. So memory is the least level of learning, lowest level of learning, and unfortunately, our education system is actually based upon memory point only. So a person who can memorize more things, a person who can remember more things, so can score well, at least in the elementary education sector. So moving up the ladder, so there is like understanding or comprehension. Then the third level is application, when we apply the knowledge that we have gained. And the fourth is analysis, then we have evaluation, and then finally we have like creation or synthesis that we call. So synthesis, or the highest level of learning, is wherein we actually contribute something to the body of knowledge. And creation, that's why research is considered to be the highest level of learning, because in research you're giving something back to the society, you're contributing to the body of knowledge. But our education system, at least in India, was centered around the lowest level of learning, that is like the memory or remembering. And with this education policy, I see our framework getting, or our education system getting a heads up, and getting like uh, setting up the ladder. So
No,
at
I
least
have to
we had,
congratulate Sister Isabella at this stage here, because she used to be with St. Luke's
yeah,
earlier, and I'm also a graduate of St. Luke's. So, ma'am, I never scored very high scores in my 10th and 12th, but I did get into IIT, and I think I really understood the subject. So, I think somewhere St. Luke's
exactly,
did give that context.
exactly, sir,
I'm not
exactly. And
sure, Shikha, whether sister can listen to us. At least, can she hear us, ma'am? Can you hear us?
you
Uh,
can give a thumbs up if you
if you
can
can
listen
hear
to
us,
us.
can you do a thumbs up? I'm not sure whether she can even hear us. If you could check,
Yes.
I'll call her. I'll call her and ask.
we'll appreciate if you can do
So
that.
actually, you're right, sir. So basically, we are so fortunate to have had our schooling from a school like St. Luke's, wherein we were actually given some. You, if you remember, there were like SUs. So ma'am can hear us. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
wonderful.
we had some classes like SUPW, and if you remember, so we used to have them on Saturdays, wherein it was skill based learning. So that is where, so skill based learning is probably, we move on to the third rung of the ladder, that is application. And so most of the schools now, and with this new education policy, so education system will go up, and we'll be moving up the Bloom's taxonomy. So I'm
There's a
honestly, I'm
concern,
very,
Kamal.
yeah,
There's a concern. When I speak to people, they say that, okay, when will it happen? There's been a big policy. These policies keep coming in, and you've been talking to a lot of educators. What's your sense around implementation, and especially around bringing in home languages and regional languages into up to class 5, grade 5? Do you think that's going to happen? And because that's a big change. Imagine
exactly.
we went to schools where we were taught right from nursery school in English. So, do you see that change really happen? And will that take away the, India is supposed to have a big strength because of its English speaking ability. So, do you think if we move to, if we move away from English speaking, or move to a more regional sort of education up to grade 5, will it take our core strength of English speaking away? What's your thought about that, Kamal?
I would like to add here, one thing is that if you look into it, still, if we look, like a lot of our population, the students who go to school are in rural areas. And if they are going to those schools, or they are not, English is not their first language. Anyways, it's not our first language. So they're not even studying English right now also. Isn't it like that? I feel that way is, so they're not studying English. So that's not a part of, in their curriculum. Also, if they're studying also, they can't speak English or they can't write. So even when these students, they are doing their 10th grade also, so they are, they are not very comfortable with the language.
My thought on this is so setting a policy is one thing, but implementation is another thing. And I'm not too sure about implementation. I'm not too sure about the thought even, if I say. And because enforcing some languages or enforcing something into education is not the way out, I suppose. So education is there for the freedom. There's a freedom of expression. So schools should be allowed to take a decision on their own. So that is what I believe. And enforcing a regional language in an English school and letting English off, I don't see it as a solution. That's what my thought is. And implementation would be like very, very tough, if we say, because regional players, all the regional political parties, and it would become like more of a political tug of war that I see. And it would actually, it would conflict with the effective implementation of the education policies. It might actually delay the positives of the education policy. That's my thought on that, sir.
So I was speaking to the director of the NCERT, and I was told that Vivek is here, so we'll get Vivek's views also. So I was
Hello, Vivek, sir.
the director of the NCERT, and he was telling me that they'll start working on the new curriculum for schools. So they expect that there'll be new curriculum coming up in the next 18 months. That's really what the plan is. So, so hopefully we'll see implementation happen, Kamal. That's thoughts. So Vivek, welcome to the discussion. Lovely to see you back with us again.
Vivek, sir, you are mute.
So implementation is another thing, sir. At least something has started. So I'm happy about it. I'm excited about it.
Yes.
That we have at least started thinking in the right direction.
So Vivek has been the ex-director of school education and education for Haryana. And Vivek, you are also a teacher now. So we'd love to hear, we spoke about what the contours of the new education policy are. We spoke about how it's going to change both, or possibly it aspires to change both school and university education. So from a implementation perspective and from a philosophical perspective, would love, to couple of minutes of your thoughts.
Yeah, I think, thank you first of all, and it's again a pleasure to be part of Ideas That Matter, which is a wonderful series of webinars. And thank you, Sister Isabella, for joining us. And I'm sure that there are many others who are listening to us. So the thing is that, as Atul must have told you, this policy is in the right direction. A lot of it depends on the implementation, and I've been director of school education, which is a very difficult position to be in. But I know that implementation is the key, and I also visit Shulini University and many other educational institutions now. Ultimately, what are we producing, or who is coming out of these institutions? That is what matters. And the child who becomes a grown-up while being in this institution is being transformed from being someone who is unaware of the world to being somewhat aware of the world. And how much enthusiasm and expertise and skill this boy or girl has is what matters. So ultimately, the aim of every policy has to be to produce these complete individuals in all respects. And Atul must have mentioned to you that creativity is a very important part of that. Any policy which encourages creativity is something that we have been talking about. Otherwise, rote learning and memorizing books is what it has been about in our times also. So if we are allowing children to study in a flexible manner, a dual degree in the college school, being able to be more creative in the school level, and as we've read, the teachers' motivation levels also should be taken care of, then our policy will be successful. Because ultimately, how inspired are teachers when they go to the classroom, or how much are they putting in as effort through their real, fire in their belly in a way? Are they doing that? That is what matters in the ultimate analysis. And who is becoming a teacher also matters. Is it someone who didn't get a job in a bank or any other place as school teacher? Or is it someone who wanted to aspire to be a school teacher? So these are generic thoughts, but I think these are the thoughts that ultimately matter in education. So can we produce teachers, and can we produce, as a result, students who are capable of holding their own?
So we've spoken to so many teachers, Vivek, and I always say this. My grandfather was being trained to be a lawyer, and he ran away from his university in the UK to actually join an education program at the Banaras Hindu University. And then he came back to Himachal to become a teacher. And And he would always say that teaching is the most noble profession and it's absolutely exciting being a teacher. But those were days when I think teachers were way more respected than, at least we keep on getting this feedback that we seek more recognition. So hopefully the policy will bring that in. I was also speaking to Dr. Dinesh Singh, who's the ex-vice chancellor of Delhi University. He's on the board of Delhi of Shulini also. And he was a member of the policy-making body of the new education policy. And I think the genesis also that he was speaking about is trying to go back to the Shantiniketan / Gurukul type of system where students learn by doing things with their hands. For the first 5 to 8 years, they're not pushed into saying whether you like science or arts or anything. They're made to experiment. They're made to do lots and lots of things so that, by the time they come to a sane age, they can decide whether they want to get into whichever stream that they want to pursue. Also, the flexibility inside a college, that they can switch programs, they can switch courses. So if this happens, this is almost like a dream come true, because I can only tell you about me. When I started studying engineering at IIT, after the first week, I figured out that if then else, and mathematics and physics was not for me. And I so wish there was a music program or a literature program at IIT, which I wish I could have shifted to. I couldn't, so I spent 4 years of my life learning engineering, which I don't use anymore. And I know the same thing happened to you, Vivek. You're an engineer too, and you went to NIT, and then you decided to be an IAS officer.
In fact, Atul, I feel that engineering and medicine and these degrees. So I was talking to a doctor who's come into the IAS in this exam result. And this girl has probably gained one thing from that which will be useful to her, and that is empathy for human beings. Because a doctor has to be caring for human beings' health and at least life. And an engineer probably learns to think logically in engineering studies, which probably helps him or her in any career. And I, of course, became director of IT because I was an engineer. So it does help somewhere along the way, and I'm sure it has helped you. But directly, you're right. Our education system should directly translate into what we do later. And that is very important.
Excellent. I think this was a great discussion, and we covered a lot of topics. I'll again see and request if sister we can hear sister. Sister, could you try and let's see if we can hear you now? Sister Agnes? Sister Agnes, if you can hear me, could you join the discussion? I'm not sure. I think we are losing.
Yes, sister, go ahead. I think she can hear us now. Go ahead, please say something. Oh, we can't hear you, sister.
Okay, I think this is unfortunate that we can't hear you, ma'am. I so wish.
You can type something, I guess.
Yeah, you can probably type something on the chat pod.
Maybe Shikha can call her up and put her on loudspeaker. Is that possible?
Shikha, is that possible? Probably Shikha is not here.
Shikha is not there, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I will call you separately after this, Sister Agnes. It's been lovely talking about this very beloved topic. I can only say that at Shulini and many of us, we are very, very excited about what's really happening. In fact, Vivek and I only last night were talking about the new education policy and getting into more philanthropic activities around education. So we are very, very excited about the new education policy. Hopefully, it will change the landscape of India. Vivek, I also believe that education can change nations. And if the new education policy is implemented well, India will truly become a superpower that it wants to be. So we'd love to hear your last thoughts, and we'll probably say goodbye after that. So your last thoughts, Vivek?
My last thoughts are that policies come and go, and this is a well-intentioned policy, but education is an ongoing process, and education systems have to be improved at the ground level. And ultimately, the ground level is not inspired by policy, but by leadership. And if leadership in the education system is dynamic, is forward-looking, is sincere, is honest, is inspired, then definitely we can make a change in any institute. You change the principal of a school at times, the new principal works wonders. At times, the new principal is a disaster. So you have to really inspire leaders in education to make a real tangible change. That is my last thought.
So creating talent will be a big challenge. I think the new programs that will come up in higher educational institutions and how we train and create more teachers will be very critical. So I think that's a great input. Once again, on behalf of Shulini, we are thankful to the Bethany Education Society. Vivek, we're really thankful to you. We know you had some critical meetings. And I can also see you matched your color of a shirt with the flowers behind. So thank you for that. Truly loved the discussion and look forward to meeting all of you once again on Ideas That Matter once again tomorrow. And Sister Isabella, we really miss you in Solon, and hopefully we can have you over at Shulini one of those days. So would other members of the society. Thank you once again and wish you all a wonderful day. Bye-bye.